mostly sovereignty. All right? And before I get into the subject of it, as much as I can, I could speak on it for several hours. I'm going to try to cram what I know into 45 minutes, but it's probably 2 or 3 hours that I could talk about it and maybe make sense. So this will be a little bit on the short side and blah, blah, blah. But the reason I want to talk about it in part is because some of the ideas that I'm going to present to you tonight on sovereignty played a role in being sued by the Attorney General of the state of Texas for $25,000 per day. That's $9 million per year. This case started out in 2001, and by the name of William Fresnel and his wife and their corporation were being sued by the Attorney General of Texas and the Texas Department of State Health Services. The case was initiated by FDA. It was initiated in Washington, but it was being prosecuted here in Texas. They spent $160,000 on law firms in their defense, and all that did was drive them into bankruptcy. The bankruptcy drove them into divorce, and they eventually left Texas for parts unknown. They disappeared, but before they did, they sold part of their equipment and part of their supplies to a man named Ben Taylor. And Ben Taylor, and this whole thing was, they were being charged with manufacture and distribution of a controlled substance. It was a civil suit. It wasn't criminal. It was civil. But this is the same law, essentially, that they used to go after drug dealers. You understand? The controlled substance was colloidal silver, all right, which is just distilled water with silver ions in it, and it's used as an inexpensive antibiotic. And these people, Mr. and Mrs. Fresnel, were probably the biggest producers of it in the country, and the FDA wanted to go after them and make an example of them and take them down. Well, the case dragged on for a couple of years, and they didn't amount to much, and they finally got to a point where they were ready to give up and just get out. All right? Fresnel's had had enough. But before they did, they sold some of the equipment, some of the supplies to Ben Taylor. Ben Taylor, then the government, he didn't buy their business. All right? This is equivalent to if I bought an old used car, and the government found out that it had been used in a bank robbery 10 years ago. Then they charged me with bank robbery because I now own the car that was involved in the bank robbery. Crazy. Taylor didn't buy the business. He just bought some of the supplies and the equipment, and they added him as a defendant. They added him and his trust and his corporation as 3 defendants. Every one of the defendants is subject to fines of $25,000 per day. Ben Taylor heard something about me. Somebody said, you ought to give Al a call. He might be able to help out. And I volunteered to get involved. And eventually, I volunteered to be fiduciary for Taylor's trust because Ben Taylor didn't want to speak in public. Like most people, he was scared to death of standing up and speaking in public. And it's most people are that way. Most people rather run naked down Main Street than stand up and speak in public. And I was like that for most of my life, but you get over it eventually. You get mad enough and you get over it. You finally get, all right, I'm going to say something. I volunteered to be fiduciary. They made a defendant on it. The case said the key to this case was determining whether colloidal silver was a drug as defined by federal drug law and also Texas drug law. And this is in the process. This is in the Attorney General's paperwork. And he says that's the key to the case. Now the case had been going on. I didn't get added as a defendant until 2006. This case had been going on since 2001 to 2006. I'm added as a defendant because I'm a fiduciary. Never thought that was happening. I thought I'd have an opportunity to stand up and just speak. Right? I never expected that I was going to be threatened with fines of 25 grand a day. I don't know that I would have done it. So surprise, surprise. I read the case, and it said the key to this case is the definition of drugs. Okay, that's the key to the case, and it was obvious if you could read that definition and you could understand it, maybe you could see something that might do you some good. Well, I read the definition, and I realized the definition says that drugs apply to man or other animals. And the first time I saw the phrase, no, more, or other animals, not and, or other animals. All right? Now, if it said man or animals, that's not a problem. But it said man or other animals, which means the government sees us as animals. Right? And the first time I saw that, I thought, my God, these damn fools, they don't even know how to write. They don't understand what they wrote here. Right? And then I keep reading through the definition, and I see it again. They said it twice in the federal definition. And I thought, my God, they really do think of us as animals. I read the Texas definition, said the same thing. We looked at 5 other states, and they said the same thing. We presume all 50 states have definitions of drugs that presume the people to be animals. I understood right away because I'm a student of the Bible. I'm not a scholar, but I'm a student of the Bible. And I know that at Genesis 1, 26 through 28, it says, on the 6th day, God created man in his image and gave man dominion over the animals.
Amen. Amen.
That means that as a Christian or a Jew, I can't be an animal. You can't call me an animal without violating my freedom of religion.
Amen.
My faith says I'm a man made in God's image and I'm given dominion over the animals. That means I can't be an animal. And my argument ultimately pivoted on that point. And what happened is the Attorney General had been sending us they've been sending us paperwork every 2 to 6 weeks, certified mail, usually a nice fat, you get another package of motions and whatever. And we'd been getting that for a year that I'd been involved in this. And when we sent this defense, which was a freedom of religion defense, we essentially said you can't treat us as animals because we're Christians. Right? That was the guts of it. We had other things, but that was the heart. They went dead silent for 5 months. They came back. Prior to that, we'd had a different judge every hearing we'd had. They came back, and Judge John K. Dietz, Chief Administrative Judge for the district, took over the case, and he held it for the next 5 months, where he tried to arrange an out-of-court settlement. He tried to persuade us to agree to a settlement, and they got to a point where they said they would not only not charge us any fines, they wouldn't charge us any court costs, which by the time this was done, the pretrial investigations and pretrial hearings cost most of $500,000 from 2001 to 2007, when this finally ended. They invested 6 years and $500,000 in this case, and they wanted us to just agree that we wouldn't pay any fines, no fines, and we wouldn't even have to pay court costs, which close to $500,000. And the Assistant Attorney General handled the case. He told us, he said he'd been there 22 years, and in fact, the state had a Mercedes-Benz. They provided him with a Mercedes-Benz to drive around in. They couldn't get him a Ford or Chrysler or whatever. They had to get him a Mercedes-Benz. He said he'd been there 22 years. He said he had never heard of the Attorney General's office ever before agreeing that they wouldn't. He said they'll agree not to fine people, but they always impose the court costs, which means every defendant should have had a fair share of $500,000 in court costs. He said he'd never heard of it before. He never understood what was going on, but Judge John K. Dietz, he got it. He understood what we were saying with this religious freedom defense. And the reason this is important is because the war on drugs is based on the presumption that the people are all animals. The war on drugs laid the foundation for the prison industrial complex, where most of the people in this, we have 70% of the people in federal penitentiaries are there on drug-related crimes. Every one of those crimes are based on the presumption that these people are nothing but animals. You understand? Animals have no meaningful rights. If you're an animal, you have no more rights than a chicken in a Tyson poultry processing plant. You got nothing. You understand? The only thing that distinguishes us from the other animals from the government's point of view is that we have firearms. We are particularly dangerous. They don't say that, but this is the only thing in my opinion. It's the only thing that makes a difference. They can go out, you can kill all the cows and pigs and sheep and goats and whatever else you want to kill, no problem. But you can't go after these particular primates because they might shoot you. There's the problem, right? Well, the point of all of this, long-winded introduction on this, but the point of all of this is that this man or other animal situation, in fact, again, we found it in 5 states besides Texas and the federal government. The earliest instance is the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act. Right? They've been at it for a century. They have presumed the people of this country to be animals. The definition of food and the definition of animals. Let me see if I... Here, sovereignty speech, 13.11.12, sovereignty speech. There's the presentation there. And I don't know, I'll just signal you when to change the... Yeah, this is what we're going to talk about tonight is individual sovereignty. And it's a concept that's been lost. People have lost the concept. It's central to our history. People don't understand that this is the spiritual foundation for the United States of America, and it's also the basis for the concept of American exceptionalism. People in government talk, oh, American exceptionalism. Barack Obama recently made some comment about we were exceptional because we fight all these damn wars. He actually said that. We're exceptional because we get involved in all these damn wars. Bull crap. That is not the basis of American exceptionalism. What American exceptionalism actually, go ahead, move one. Go ahead, move again. Copyright. The sovereigns are coming, the sovereigns are coming. American exceptionalism is based on the idea that we are each sovereigns, or at least we were when this country began. This, sovereigns are coming, the sovereigns are coming. You may have heard that there's a sovereignty movement, and you may have heard that the people involved in the sovereignty movement are violent, and they're out to kill people, and I don't know what kind of damage we're all going to do, perhaps engage in cannibalism or whatever. I'm not sure how far they expect this to go. This is from the FBI. Give me a minute. This is one of the FBI articles. Sovereign citizens, a growing domestic threat to law enforcement. They go through and they have there are a number of articles on the FBI website. This is one talking about sovereign citizens. Go ahead. Southern Poverty Law Center talked about it. And they estimate that there are 300,000 sovereign citizens in the sovereigns, alleged sovereigns in the sovereign citizen movement. They also claim that there have been 7 murders by sovereigns since 1995. I said, oh my gosh, these people are dangerous. All right? Well, here's the problem with that. In 18 years, there have been 7 murders by an average of maybe 150,000 sovereigns each year. Okay? That translates into less than 1.5 murder per year committed by sovereigns. The murder rate, the average murder rate in this country is about 4.8 per 100,000. Wow. All right? Now, the point is, the people sitting behind that door, right? About 5 of them will commit murder this year. You show me 100,000 people just like the people behind the door, and we can expect 5 homicides. You show me 100,000 sovereigns, and we can expect 1/2. The sovereigns are approximately, what translates, by the time you do the numbers, the average American is 12 times as likely to kill someone as the members of the sovereignty movement. Right? Now, why is the government exaggerating how dangerous these people are? What's the problem with sovereignty? Right? And the problem is it poses the single biggest threat to government of which I'm aware. It does not advocate shooting people, doesn't advocate bombing people. It does advocate reading the history books. It does advocate reading the Declaration of Independence. It does advocate understanding something about your Bible. And if you can grab hold of those ideas, all of a sudden you can make claims. And we essentially made those claims. We didn't make them expressly in the case I'm talking to you about where we stopped them. Government finally dropped the case. They didn't come any further. They just stopped writing to us. They didn't say, you win, you lose, nothing. They just stopped. They're gone. Right? There's no precedent for that. Nobody's done it. Nobody has done that in this country. There are no pro se litigants. And they did that based on that line of defense. Nobody else has done that. Nobody's been threatened by $500,000 in 6 years and the Attorney General and the rest of that sort of thing and run them off with a freedom of religion defense. And that's the grace of God. That isn't me. That's the good Lord lets you see things sometimes. And that's what got it done. They just dropped it. Why? Again, the war on drugs is based on this. If this goes forward, all right, this concept goes forward, we lose the war on drugs. American medicine, food, drugs, and medical devices are all defined in terms of man or other animals. All 3 of them. There is no American medicine that doesn't involve drugs or medical devices, with the possible exception of psychiatry. All right? You might be able to get a shrink who just talks to you talks to you and heals you with his conversation, but more than likely he's going to want to give you drugs. If he does, and they're regulated, it's operating on the presumption that you are nothing but an animal. American medicine. The pharmaceutical industry and billions of profits are based on the presumption that you are nothing but livestock. Let's move on. Let's see what else we've got here. And there's the point. One of the points. The average sovereign is probably less violent than the Amish. You understand? And the government says, oh, these people are dangerous. No, they're not. Oh, well, truth is we are dangerous, but we're not violent. Give me another one. Here's part of the problem. There's a bunch of people who have heard the term sovereign, and they understand that if you're a sovereign, you are above, you are not exposed to law, to some of the law. They think as a sovereign, they're not exposed to any law. They think they're free to do anything they want, and they're not. People who think that are anarchists. Anarchists believe they're not subject to any law. Sovereigns don't believe we're not. We don't believe we're not subject to any law. We're absolutely subject to God's law, and we're also subject to the law of the fellow sovereigns. Anybody got an idea what the law of the fellow sovereigns is?
Constitution.
That's part of it? No, not common law. I'm worried at common law because common law from England presumes that only the King of England is sovereign. I don't know that common law is something I necessarily want to rely on. But the organic law of the United States of America includes Declaration of Independence, Articles of Confederation, Northwest Territorial Ordinance, and the Constitution of the United States. Down here it includes the Constitution of the State of Texas. That's the people's law. That's the sovereign's law. We're absolutely subject to that. And we give the government authority. You can make more regulations. We're going to trust you. We're going to send you up to Washington, or we'll send you to Austin, whatever. We give you this authority on condition that you don't pass any stupid laws that violate the sovereign's law, which are the Constitution, is what's commonly known, but there's more. And this can be seen in the revised statutes, 1873, federal statutes. I don't have an image of it here, but I should have, but I don't have it. Go ahead and roll it. I start talking and I don't keep track of my own notes. All right, well, here's one of the things. I'm losing a point here, but I'm going to go with this. FBI coined the term paper terrorism to describe those sovereigns who use courtroom strategies to litigate rather than shoot. Well, I am a paper terrorist, right? I have a dozen dictionaries. I read, I write. I am competent, I'm fairly fluent in the English language, and the government finds that terrifying. Not because I'm going to shoot anybody. I haven't shot anybody, at least not yet. We don't know, it's not over yet. We don't know how that's going to work out for sure. But I haven't shot anybody. I haven't advocated shooting anybody. All right? But the government says, oh my God, he's a terrorist. Yes, yes, I am. I am a terrorist. Because I am advocating this concept of individual sovereignty, which has to be terrifying to the government.
That's right.
If people can grab hold of this and begin to understand, go ahead and roll this again. If people get hold of this, we can take this country back. You know, Regina, you asked me to talk about the third party and the numbers in an off-year election. In an off-year election, typically only about 40% of the people vote. In a two-party system, that means in order to win, you need 21% of the eligible voters to vote for you. That's all. Because only 40% are voting. So you need 21 out of 40. If 21 out of 40 votes, but that's 21 out of 100 who could vote, most of whom don't. How many do you need out of the total 100% if you could establish a third party? And the answer is about 14%. Operating on the assumption that the third party didn't increase the size of, we still had 40% of the people voting. You need 13, 14%, you can make a run for it. 14% translates into, what, 7? Yeah, it's about 1 in 7. You could win. You can take this country back. You don't need 50%. With a viable third party, you need 1 man or woman in 7. And we can take this whole country back. I guarantee you a seventh of the people in this country agree with everything you're talking about at these meetings. You may be the only people that are showing up here tonight, but I guarantee if you went out and talked to most of the people out there, you're going to find at least 1 in 7 who says, yeah, I agree with you. I got things I got to do. I can't be here tonight, but I agree with you. Point is, this is doable. You don't need 51%. You need 1/7. And you can take this country back. If you can get 1/6, you can really, well, with 1/7, you got a shot. 1/6, you're rolling. 1/5, you can take this whole country back. It's that easy. And the government wants people to think there's nothing you can do. We're helpless. There's nothing. You'll never get 51%. Don't need 51%. We need 20%. If we could get 20%, they're already there. What keeps them from supporting us? They don't think we can win. That's why. And they don't want to waste their vote. They want it, they say, I'm not going to vote for somebody who's not going to win. This is part of the reason I say politics is a process, not an event. All right? You get people in there and make them understand the mathematics, and you make them understand, wait a second, this is possible. We could do this. And all of a sudden people say, yeah, what about that? This isn't just some wishful thinking or some vain activity we need 1 in 5 and we can take this country back. We could probably do it with 1 in 6, and with 1 in 7 we'll win half, lose half. We won't win them all, but we can get a bunch of them. All right, we can make a big difference. Well, I've got 2 speeches going on in my mind. This is one of them, and the other one is the one I started with, and I'm trying to run down 2 tracks at the same time. This was just what happened in the case, man or other animals, the paperwork, and some of the results. Go ahead and roll again. Now, here, those of you, if you are familiar with something like find law, okay, which is a website on the internet, and you can look up law. You can look up Supreme Court cases, state cases. There's a lot of stuff available there. You can look under codes at Title 21, United States Code, 321, subsection A. And it defines food. And here's what we ran into. We've shortened this a little bit just because to get fit here. But this is the definition, although some of the terms have been, some of the sentences are missing. Some of the text is missing. But this is the gist of it. The term food means 1, articles used for food or drink for man or other animals. 2, chewing gum. 3, articles used for components of any such article. That's the definition of food. Man or other animals. If you are eating food, you are presumed to be an animal. The reason the FDA can regulate what's on that plate is because you are presumed to be an animal.
If we are animals,
yep,
and we eat,
yep,
the FDA, the government eat, they are animals too.
Sure they are.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll get to why this is significant.
Subject to the same thing.
Yeah, but we're all subject to the same thing. Go ahead and roll it again. Here's 21 U.S.C. 321 G1. Definition of drug. The term drug means articles intended for the use and the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease in man or other animals. And C, articles other than food intended to affect the structure or any function of the body of a man or other animals. Give me another one. Device. 21 U.S.C. 321H, term device. And this is the word that's associated with medical device. Okay, that's where this is applied. Means the instrument, apparatus, implement, machine, which intended as the diagnosis disease, blah, 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 man or other animals, intended to affect the structure or any function of the body of man or other animals. Okay, roll again to see what else we've got here. And it goes back to the Pure Food and Drug Act, 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act. You can look this up for yourself on the internet. You go home and you type in 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act, and you will see that Section 6 says that the term drugs shall include all medicines, preparations, yada, 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 man or other animals. The term food, as used herein, shall include all articles used for food, drink, confectionery condiments by man or other animals. It's been going on for a century. Why is this interesting? One of the reasons it's interesting is because if you're an animal, you have no meaningful rights. And this is not a small thing, and it's not just a theory. Before the Nazis did whatever happened, it came to be called the Holocaust. All right? There's debates about the size and dimension, but something happened there. Before they went after the Jews, they first declared the Jews to be Untermenschen by law. Unter means under, mensch means man, it means subhuman. Animals. If you're an animal, we can exterminate you. We can handle you like a hive of wasps, a nest of rats. We can kill the mothers, the fathers, the combatants, non-combatants, the children, kill them all. They're animals. Same thing as on the farm. You have no significant rights, and it's not a small thing. This is not just an interesting curiosity. This goes to the heart of what's happening in this country. And incidentally, since I've started talking about this, I've been almost singularly unsuccessful at communicating this idea. Some people are getting it, and I've heard reports that some people are using this in their paperwork and their arguments, but it's been surprising to me that it's one of these things I thought would take off like a rock. But it is beginning to, it's beginning to catch, it's beginning to have an effect, and it takes a while for people to understand it. It's complex, it's surprising, it involves things like the theory of evolution. Go ahead, give me another one. If sovereigns are uncommonly nonviolent, and most sovereigns are preparing to litigate in court rather than shoot it out in the streets, why is the government so afraid of the sovereignty movement? And the idea is, if you are not an animal, the government isn't your ruler. The government, go ahead, roll it again. And this is because the country was built on the premise that you and I are each a sovereign, and the government is our public servant. The government always serves the sovereign. It's a fundamental principle of every governmental system in the world. Every social system, the government serves the sovereign. And we'll get into that a little deeper if I don't run out of time here. But government is terrified by the idea that some of us are going to figure out, wait a second, they're not supposed to be our rulers. That's why most of you are here right now. You are concerned that we don't have limited government anymore. And most people don't understand why. We know something's wrong, but what is it? Yeah, what's the problem is the government has betrayed the fundamental principle this nation was organized on. Whoa, give me another. Sovereign's law, I told you about that. The Constitution is the organic law. Go ahead. What is the essence of sovereignty? Who the boss? That's all it is. All right? If I'm the sovereign, you are my subjects. If you're the sovereign, we are your subjects. Okay? The sovereign is the boss. Who's the boss? That's all sovereignty is about. And this is why government is concerned with this. Because we can raise a legitimate issue that we can trace back and legally prove we're the boss. The government admits, they say we the people are sovereign. Supreme Court has said that, but they haven't said in what capacity are we sovereign. And we'll get into that in a moment. This is perhaps the big secret. Go ahead. Go ahead. Historic and spiritual foundation. Sovereignty flows from God. It's not simply a political concept. It flows from God. This is important. Sovereignty is spiritual rather than political and secular. And then we have law forms, which means the form of government that people use. Your law forms can be distinguished based on asking, go ahead, roll. Sovereignty flows from God, go ahead. Well, sovereignty, I'll get to this in more in a moment. You can distinguish every kind of government you run into by asking one fundamental question. Who is sovereign? All right? That's the fundamental question that determines whether you are dealing with a monarchy, an aristocracy, or a republic. Who is the sovereign? All right? First principle, Genesis 1:1. This is in the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Most people look at that as simply an introduction in the sense that you read a fairy tale and said, once upon a time, there was a beautiful fairy princess who lived in an ancient castle with her wicked stepmother. All right? Or it was a dark and rainy night. All right? You can do the same thing. That's not what this is. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. What's that mean? It's a statement of legal title. It's the very first verse in the Bible, and not by accident. Today we enshrine the idea of creation in our patent laws and our copyright laws. If you create anything, you own it. The act of creation, you get to make the copies. You get to control whatever is done with it. You own it by virtue of the act of creation. That's the fundamental idea behind patent law and copyright law. When it says in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, it means He owns the whole damn system. He owns it all. You, me, the floor, the roof, everything. He created it. He owns it. That means He has legal title. He can do whatever He wants, anytime He wants, because it's His. Second principle. Let's see if we can get down. Let's get the next one. Second principle, Genesis 1:26-28, sixth day of creation. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish and sea, and over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. What does that mean? talked about it earlier. It means that man is not an animal, point one. It means that he gave man dominion over everything on the earth, everything that creepeth on the earth. This is close to the concept of sovereignty right here. Take another one. Genesis 9:6. Whoso sheddeth a man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. It means the reason for several thousand years that you can't murder man or woman is because they are made in man in God's image. Right? That's the reason. It's the reason you can kill the cows, you can kill the sheep, you can kill everything else, but you can't kill a man, woman, or child because they're made in God's image. Right? When the government says, oh no you're not, you're just an animal. You have just shed that. It is now okay. You are now in a class that where murder is okay. It's not even murder anymore. Now it's just killing. This is not a small thing. This is powerful and important. Go ahead. Sovereigns must protect subjects. I'm not going to get into that right now. Go ahead. Here's something. Now, we're going to talk about European sovereignty. It will help present the idea of sovereignty a little more clearly. He'll present the idea of sovereignty a little more clearly. Go ahead. European sovereigns. You had kings. One king per country. One king, one queen. Whatever it was. That was sovereign. All right? The sovereign had went through a coronation ceremony that was conducted in a church. All right? The sovereign had the divine right of kings. He got his rights from God. He got his rights from God. All else were subjects because they did not get their rights from God. He was king because he gets his rights from God. The coronation ceremony, the word corona, means the crown. The coronation ceremony performed in a church results in this crown, which is the special effects of earlier eras where they're trying to duplicate the corona you see around the head of the Christ, or the corona you see around the head of one of the saints. That's what this is supposed to signify, the corona. All right? If you got a corona, you're God's man. You're the one person in the country who is directly under God, and that makes you king or queen. You are the sovereign because you got your rights from God, and no one else in the country did, and they are subjects because they did not get their rights from God. They get theirs indirectly and through the sovereign. If he cares to give them. Go ahead. Divine right of kings, one sovereign in a monarchy. All else are subjects, so we just went through this. Government serves the sovereign. Now, this is an important concept, but we'll illustrate it a little further. Go ahead. Here's a chess game. Okay? King. What do we know about the king? King is sovereign. Right? What about the rest of them? They're not. We can take the pawns and the knights and the bishops and even the queens, and we can knock them off the board of life. You understand? Land on them and kill them. But what do you do with the king? You can checkmate him. All right? You can capture him. But you can't kill the king. Why? The king has this cross on top of his head. The king is the sovereign. He got his right to life from God. We can't take that from him. And the chess set is just a modern vestige of this concept of sovereignty. Go ahead. Law forms. The word law form, it appears in the Declaration of Independence, and it refers to hierarchies of authority and essentially governments. There are three forms of government, in my opinion: monarchy, aristocracy, and republic. The first question to determine what kind of government you're dealing with is you pose the question, who holds sovereign power? There's the first question. It's not the only question, but it's the first one. Go ahead. In a monarchy, as we've seen in England, for example, God is number one. You have one king under him. He is the earthly sovereign. He is sovereign because his rights flow directly from God. He has the divine right of kings. Below him is the government, which serves the sovereign, and below the government is all the subjects. And you can slap them around anytime you want, any way you want, if you're the government serving the king. Huh? If you're down at the bottom of the pecking order, you're in trouble. This is a hierarchy of authority. Go ahead, roll again. An aristocracy. Again, we have God, at least historically. Then we have several aristocrats, or perhaps families. All right? Now we have a few sovereigns, not just one sovereign. In a monarchy, mono, you have one sovereign. Aristocracy, you have multiple sovereigns, but not everybody. And the sovereigns are served by government. Down at the bottom are all the great unwashed, the subjects. All right? Go ahead. The republic is a little harder to diagram because there's two variations on the republic. In a republic, everyone shares in the sovereignty. We the people are sovereign in the Republican form of government, which is guaranteed in the federal Constitution and also in the Texas Constitution. We the people are sovereign. We the people are also sovereign in the national democracy that we're all participating in right now. But they're two entirely different forms of government and law, because when we are sovereign all together as a collective, we have no meaningful rights. In the Republican form of government that's guaranteed in the Constitution, we're sovereign as individuals, and we do have rights. Go ahead, Roland. If you run into a republic, you have to ask a second question. In what capacity are all members of the republic sovereign? As individuals or as a collective? If you're a sovereign, 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 I'm a sovereign, what we have is a nation of sovereigns, which is exactly what a Supreme Court declared in Chisholm versus Georgia in 1793, and they said the people are sovereigns, plural, without subjects. Supreme Court, 1793. Yeah, 1793. And this is 17 years after the Declaration of Independence. It's only, what? Less than 10 years after the Constitution was ratified. The court knew what they were talking about. They understood we were all supposed to be sovereigns. Go ahead and roll this. Republican form of government is guaranteed in Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution. Says the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a Republican form of government. It's important to understand one Republican form of government for Texas, and another one for Oklahoma, and another one for Illinois, and another one for Kansas. Each state had a separate Republican form of government. Within each state, you can be a sovereign. But it doesn't guarantee a Republican form of government at the federal level. It doesn't guarantee a Republican form of government for territories. It doesn't guarantee a Republican form of government for Washington, D.C. It only applies to the states of the Union, every state of this Union. They can move you into a territory, for example, or put you under the presumption that you're operating out of Washington, D.C. You lose the Republican form of government. The Republican form of government, let me see if I, go ahead. Here's Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution. Inherent political power, Republican form of government. All political powers inherent people. All governments are founded on their authority and instituted to benefit the faith people of Texas, pledged to the preservation of a Republican form of government, and subject to this limitation only. They have at all times the inalienable right to alter, reform, or abolish their government in such manner as they may think expedient. What's the point? The point is the founders in Texas, the people who drafted this Constitution, they said subject to this limitation only. The one thing you absolutely have to have in Texas is a Republican form of government. Do we have it?
No.
No. We have a democracy. Go ahead. The Republican form is a kind of republic, but it's not, you can't just say the Republic of Texas or the Republic of the United States. You've got to grab hold of this Republican form of government. The term is used in both the federal Constitution and it's also used in the Texas Constitution. They don't guarantee you a republic because a republic includes collectives. The Republican form of government is the one that recognizes you as a man made in God's image. It says, yes, you are endowed by your Creator with certain unalienable rights as per the Declaration of Independence. That's the Republican form of government, and they don't want it. They want to get off into the democracy. Go ahead. Here's a democracy. 2 wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. Okay? Yeah. And it's a joke, and everybody says, ha ha, it's funny. Why is it funny? Because we know that 2 is greater than 1. Okay? And the 2 will vote to eat the 1. The democracy. And that's not the essence of the democracy. The essence of the democracy is that the sheep is an animal. The sheep does not have the unalienable right to life that's declared in the Declaration of Independence. Second sentence of the Declaration of Independence says, we hold these truths to be self-evident. That all men, means all men and women, are created equal that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You are endowed by your Creator with certain unalienable rights. These rights cannot be taken from you. Right? And that includes your right to life. This sheep is their dinner because he's in a democracy. In the democracy, the sheep is not a sovereign. The sheep is one of the members of the sovereignty. We the people are sovereign in a democracy, but we're sovereign as members of a collective, not as individuals. Now this is a little bit hard to follow. I know it's confusing first time you hear it, rest that, but this is what it comes down to. This is why democracy is so dangerous. The democracy, we can sit back anytime we want. And if we are the collective is an artificial entity. It's a fiction. It doesn't really exist. But we say the collective is the sovereign. How do we know the will of the sovereign? We vote. It is presumed that anytime 51% of the people vote for this, that, or whatever, that is presumed to reflect the will of the collective. The collective is the sovereign. But if you are one of the members of the sovereign, you got nothing. The collective is all powerful. This is true for communism, socialism, and democracy. It's all about just voting. And anytime, let's suppose we are a collective in a democracy. We can vote. Right now, what do you want? This is Rudy and Aaron's. Why don't we take a vote? Everybody wants to vote that we take the projector. Right? If I can get 51% of the people to vote to take the projector, you're out. You got no projector. And that's a nice little camera you got there too. How about we take that? And what about anybody here? How about murder? How about, are we in favor of murder? If 51% says, let's kill this guy, we can do it. Because he, as a member of the democracy, as a member of the collective, he does not have the God-given unalienable right to life. He is not a sovereign, an individual. He's part of the collective sovereign, but he's not individually sovereign. That means every one of us are in great jeopardy every single day. You got nothing to protect you against the will of the majority, and it might not even be a will of the majority of people, will of the majority of the representatives of Congress. Yeah.
You're describing the mentality of lynch mobs.
Sure. I'm describing what happened in the Soviet Union. I'm describing what happened under Stalin. I'm describing what's happened throughout most of the world. When our country came along with the Declaration of Independence, go ahead and see what this has got on it. All right, here's the collectivist law. They don't admit God. God created all things. He created no fictions. God can't lie. Legal fictions are lies. A corporation, for example, is a legal fiction. God created no corporations, so they're creations of man. Man creates corporations. God does not create corporations. They are legal fictions. They're lies. A collective is a legal fiction. It's a lie. The collective will not recognize God. It says that the collective itself, we have one sovereign again, but it's everybody put together, and no one has a right to resist. Government serves the collective. Whoever captures control of the government can do whatever they want. And down at the bottom we have the people and or animals, the subjects, persons, and this is a dangerous law form, and it gets a bunch of people killed because you don't have the right to resist the majority. Our country is the first one that ever came along and said, wait, in England, the king, they had one king, right? He was the sovereign. When this country started up and they said, no, wait a second, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. They meant all men, including kings, monarchs, queens, all of us were equal. And we are all endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. We are endowed by God. Each of us carries an equal endowment from God. That was the divine right of kings. They essentially said in the second sentence of the Declaration, you are all endowed by God with certain unalienable rights, and equally endowed. And that means you're a sovereign, you're a sovereign, you're a sovereign, you're a sovereign, you're a sovereign. I'm sovereign. It is because of this endowment from God, that's what makes you each a sovereign. And if you are, the government must serve you. Government, when do we see the government in the Republican form of government? We see them when we call them. Right? We don't see the government coming down and tracking us down the street saying, ooh, you don't have your seatbelts fastened, or ooh, you're going 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. The government calls on us when one of the sovereigns invokes our servants. Said, look, my friend Ralph over there, he owes me $100. He hasn't paid me the $100. He's a sovereign, I'm a sovereign. What are we going to do? We call our servant and say, and I say, Get this guy, he owes me $100. If I don't call the government doesn't appear. The government isn't there to regulate you unless another sovereign has invoked the power. The rest of the time, just go in the other room and eat donuts. Stay away. You understand? We don't need to. This is part of the reason we are dealing with government that gets bigger and bigger and bigger is because you people have become animals. You are no longer sovereigns. You don't have the sovereignty as a limit, a fundamental limit on government. Go ahead and roll again. There's the Declaration of Independence. Who are you in relation to God? Are you an animal or are you a man made in God's image? That's an important point. Declaration of Independence is what started this. Very few people understand the meaning. The second sentence of the Declaration where it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, all men are created equal. It is unrivaled in Western history. Nobody's ever done it before with a possible exception of the Hebrews and Exodus up through the era of Judges. When they went to Kings, they kissed it all goodbye. Until they got through Judges, they were all essentially directly under God. There was no one that was above the law, including Moses. All right, he didn't get to make it into the promised land. He crossed God and said, you're not the king of this thing. You're blah, blah, blah. This is the first time it's happened in modern history. And it hasn't happened in 2,000 years where any government started out and said, you're sovereign, you're sovereign, you're sovereign. You all get your rights from God. It hasn't been taught to us in schools. We don't recognize the significance. Go ahead and roll it. This is the sentence I was talking about a second. This is the most radical statement in Western political history. There's nothing else to rival it. Marx had nothing on the people who drafted this. This is profound. Go ahead. Now, I don't think I've got the third sentence. I don't think I included the third sentence. This is just, go ahead. Third sentence, there it is. Third sentence says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the government. What is the purpose of government as envisioned by the founding fathers? And the purpose was to secure these rights. What rights? The God-given, unalienable rights that were declared in the preceding sentence, the second sentence. They're telling us the founders' idea was the fundamental business of government was to secure to every man, woman, and even unborn child their God-given, unalienable rights. Right? That was the business of government. And even if you didn't know what your rights were, they were obligated to secure them. This was the foundation for land of the free. This is where you could do what you wanted to do. And the government had to secure your rights even if you didn't know what they were. That's not the world today. If you don't know your rights, you have no chance. If you do know your rights, you also need to know all of the procedure. Someone mentioned earlier, and it was, I don't remember, did somebody, yeah. You got to know all that damn procedure, or your rights still won't be enforced. Even if you know what your rights are. But under the original law form envisioned by the founders in the Declaration, their purpose was to secure God-given unalienable rights. That was the purpose. And this is the foundation for our individual sovereignty. Their purpose was to secure my sovereignty and your sovereignty and your sovereignty and your sovereignty. They didn't do it. We have moved away from it. Go ahead. The American law form differs. The English law form was a monarchy. The American law form was the Republican form of government. Again, I mentioned Chisholm versus Georgia, 1793. Government serves the sovereigns, rules over the subjects. We had no subjects in this country. With the possible exception under Chisholm versus Georgia, they said we have no subjects in this country with the possible exception of Negro slaves. They admitted that they might be treated as subjects. What is the foundation for slavery? It's a presumption that people are animals. All right? It's part of the reason the Constitution only gave them they only counted Negro slaves as 3/5 of a man for voting. Because the blacks were presumed to be animals. Then you could enslave them, you could own them, you could do what you want with them. We are now living in a world where our government once again presumes us all to be animals. Right? I mean, we got people that are going to prison every day. Our prisons, we have the highest prison population in the world. It's based on the presumption, largely, that we are animals. And therefore, we don't have the same rights we used to have. It's easier to convict us. Even if you're innocent, you can be tossed away. And especially like drugs. Drug crimes. Presumption, you're an animal. We can jail you. It is wrong, it's wicked, and from my perspective, it goes to the heart of the problem we have in this country. Go ahead. Oh, the English law form, I've been through this already, but here we had God, number one king, then the government, then the multitude of subjects, and down on the bottom, animals. Go ahead. There's the law form created under this is the Republican form of government created in 1776. God, number one, we get our rights from God. We the people all get our rights from God. That makes us all sovereigns. State governments are public servants. Now, below that, we would have animals and slaves. The presumption is that the slaves are animals. If you're going to accept that presumption, then you're going to have slavery, and you're going to be one of the slaves. Go ahead. It's a high water mark of the Protestant Reformation. We're talking about the American law form. It's unprecedented in Western history. It's spiritual, not political. This is the spiritual foundation for this country. Go ahead. So there's three forms of government. Monarchy, one man is sovereign. Aristocracy, a few people are sovereign. Might be a few families, hard to say. Three, republics. All men are equal. Okay? In the republic, all men are equal. We all have an opportunity to be in the government. We can work in the government. Anybody can grow up to be president. But are they equal as individual sovereigns under the Republican form of government, or are they equal as subjects within the collective? And I don't know if I'm making that point clear, and it's hard to do. It took me, I don't know, it might have taken me a couple of years to roll around the back of my mind before I finally began to put the pieces together. I was like, wait a second, I get this. This is making sense. Go ahead. Two forms in the Republic. We already talked about this. Go ahead. Here's the Republican collective. We have the collective at the top. That's the sovereign. It's a fiction. It doesn't really exist. But its will is presumed. We discover it by voting. 51% say, kill him. Take his land. Take his property. Goodbye. All right? That's why the two wolves can eat the sheep. What the two wolves don't understand is tomorrow night, either one of the wolves can be dinner. All right? Every one of the wolves are just as vulnerable as the sheep, because none of them have God-given unalienable rights. All right? Go ahead. I'm going to run out of time before I can do this, but the collective is the sovereign. When the collective is the sovereign, the Union of Soviet Socialistic Republics. You may remember former Soviet Union. They weren't joking when they said the Union of Soviet Socialistic Republics. It was a collectivist form of government, but it was still composed of republics. There's no reason. A lot of people say, oh, I'm in the Republic of Texas, or I'm in the Republic of the United States, or something. Well, big damn deal. That doesn't get it. It can still be a collective, and if it is, you have no significant rights as an individual. Anytime the majority wants to turn on you, you're toast, and you have no power to resist. Go ahead. And incidentally, that includes, we've got communism, socialism, and democracy. Democracy is not the Republican form of government. The Republican form of government guaranteed in the federal Constitution, guaranteed in the Texas Constitution. The word democracy does not appear in either constitution. Why do we have a democracy? How did we get a democracy? Where'd that come from? We're guaranteed a Republican form of government, and it's expressly guaranteed. And we have, what? A democracy. Go ahead. Chisholm versus Georgia. There's another case, 2011. I won't get into that. Bond versus United States. Roland. Go ahead, flip it again. Well, this is the contest that's going on today. And government is fearful about this concept, this conflict between the sovereign people versus the sovereign government. This is why they are upset, and even they claim that people like myself are terrorists, because we're simply advocating what the Founding Fathers guaranteed over 200 years ago. That's all we're doing. And they're saying, oh my gosh, this is terrifying. Well, of course it is. Because if we prevail, those guys are losing all or most of the power they have right now. Their capacity to kick us around is going to be dramatically diminished. And so they say this is terrifying, the idea that anyone would take us back to the roots that this country started with. But part of the reason I do this is in hopes, in part, that if 20% of the American people grab hold of this idea, 1 in 5, we take this whole country back. And it can happen just as soon as people do that. Roll it again. The sovereignty movement grows, governments clearly exceeded and even violated the Constitution. Some people are looking for reasons and power to reduce the seemingly unlimited power of government. Government won't recognize the people's sovereignty. They refuse to recognize it. How do you know? What evidence do you have of that? You see it every single time you see the government just sneering at a principle in the Constitution. That's the people's law. The Constitution is the people's law. And the government is saying, screw that. We don't have to obey you, but you got to obey us. And the sovereignty movement is saying, no, 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 no. You have to obey us, and we don't have to obey any of your laws that don't conform to our Constitution. We give you this much power and this much only, and you want to pass laws, fine, but your laws must conform to the Constitution. And if they don't, they're no good. And the government says, oh yeah. This is the essence of the struggle that we're dealing with right now. Roll again. Key to knowledge. Woe to you lawyers, for you've taken away the key to knowledge. You did not enter in yourselves, and those who were entering you hindered.
Wow.
What is the key to knowledge? Now, a lot of people will give you a bunch of different opinions. I have an opinion. I can't tell you it's the absolute truth, but I think it's true. If you read the Bible, you'll see instance after instance where God knocks the Assyrians on their butt, for example. Or God shows somebody else, says, all right, and why does he do it? And he says, time and again, so they will know that I am God. I believe that's the key to knowledge. I believe knowing that he is God. I believe that's the key to knowledge. He says, where you've taken away the key to knowledge. That's what the lawyers have done, the politicians, the rest of it, by saying you're animals. If you're an animal, you got no claim on God. You're no longer made in God's image. You can be murdered. Genesis 9:6 says we can't kill you people because you're made in God's image. If you're an animal, that doesn't count. They can kill you. You got to know who God is, to my mind, and you've got to establish your relationship with him. Go ahead and roll it. I might have another. And here, how do you access these things? This is the last. I'm actually getting this done about on time.
You're doing good.
Yeah, I've never done that before. It must be. This is an unusual night. It is. Two roots. If you wanted to claim your God-given unalienable rights under the Declaration of Independence, you want to make a claim on those. How do you get back to them? Well, they flow from God, which tells you what? Any right that is declared or implied in the Declaration of Independence is part of your religious freedom. We've got a First Amendment that guarantees you the freedom of religion. We've got a First Amendment that prevents establishment of religion by the government, and when they declare you all to be animals, what are they saying? They're establishing a pagan religion. Right? That's what's going on. And you can challenge them on this. And you got a First Amendment that takes you back. We got Article 1, Section 6 of the Texas Constitution take you right back. We got a claim. I'm a man. I am made in God's image, and I am a Christian. I have access by means of the First Amendment to claim my sovereignty and the rights that will flow out of the Declaration of Independence. What else do we have? Ninth Amendment, which I should have written down because I can't quote it exactly. Does anyone happen to have a copy of the Constitution with them?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes, sir. I think I have 3 minutes on my camera left.
Well, that'll be enough. If you're quick, it'll be enough. If you're not quick, well, it'll be enough anyway, won't it?
There you go.
All right. The Ninth Amendment. A lot of people talk about the 10th Amendment. Reservation of powers and the rest of that sort of thing. I can put my glasses on.
Al,
Yeah.
can I have a comment? You know, the Bill of Rights is its own document.
Yep.
It is got a preamble. The Constitution, for most people, we weren't going to accept it. Only when the Bill of Rights were written. And the preamble says that if there's any, basically says if there's anything in the Constitution that conflicts with these rights, which we outline here, it's not legal.
I understand.
Treaties, whatever.
I understand.
And so the preamble is the key to the Bill of Rights. You should almost consider the Constitution and the Bill of Rights as two separate documents.
What the preamble actually says, it says the purpose of these, what became the Bill of Rights, when it was the cover letter that went out with the proposed Bill of Rights, and went out to, they sent out 13 proposed amendments, and the states ratified 10. The preamble said the purpose of these proposed rights is to prevent misconstruction or abuse of the powers of the Constitution. It means it was there. They're there to protect we the people against the federal government. That's exactly what was intended. Every one of them, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, everyone in the federal Constitution is to protect us against them. They recognize the feds as a danger. Let me see if I can get this 9th Amendment in here. It says the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution. What is that? Oh, that's 10th, sorry. The enumeration in the Constitution, I'm reading the 9th. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. This is the second avenue back to making your claim of your God-given unalienable rights. Our Declaration of Independence is one of our founding documents. It says we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. There are others. Right? We can grab those unalienable rights by means of the 9th Amendment. What's the judge going to do? If I say, look, I'm making a claim on those God-given unalienable rights, and the judge says, you can't get there from here. I says, yes, I can, by the 9th Amendment. The 9th Amendment guarantees all of the rights, even if they're not listed in the Constitution. And clearly the rights that were listed in the Declaration of Independence would fill that, would conform to that requirement. So there's ways of doing this. And this is not necessarily hard. That's not necessarily brain surgery. It takes some effort to understand these principles, but you got a big inducement to grasp these ideas. You've got to get the government off your back and make them understand you're not animals. You've got to make them understand you're men and women made in God's image, endowed by your Creator with certain unalienable rights. And if you can do that, you are on your way back to restoring a measure of liberty and freedom in this country. And if you can't do it, won't do it, guess what? Welcome to the global plantation where you are all livestock. Understand? You can be used, abused, shot, killed, anything they want to do. It all works if you're an animal. That's all I have to say. I'm out of time. Thank you. You can get to my blog at Adask, ADASK.wordpress.com. All right?
Yep, good.
Is that it? That's about it?
Yep.
Can we